The moment people stop seeing your humanity, they start believing they can rewrite your story. The first thing anyone noticed was the sound of metal clicking into place. It echoed across the quiet downtown plaza just after 8 o'clock on a cool Tuesday morning in Arlington, Virginia, where commuters hurried toward office buildings with steaming coffee cups and briefcases swinging at their sides. Heads turned in unison as two white police officers secured handcuffs around the wrists of a calm black woman standing beside a dark blue SUV. She didn't argue. She didn't pull away. She simply lifted her chin, looked each officer in the eye, and remained perfectly still while dozens of strangers slowed their pace to watch. Officer Tyler McCall believed he had complete control of the situation. 20 years in uniform had taught him to trust his instincts above everything else. And at that moment, every instinct convinced him that the woman standing before him had no business being where she was. She wore a simple navy blazer, charcoal slacks, polished leather shoes, and carried a worn black portfolio that looked ordinary enough, yet something about her quiet confidence irritated him more than open defiance ever could. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he ordered firmly, scanning the gathering crowd as another patrol unit rolled to the curb with flashing lights reflecting across nearby storefront windows. The woman complied without hesitation. "My hands have never left your sight, officer," she answered in a calm, measured voice. Her words carried no anger, no fear, only remarkable composure. That calmness unsettled Tyler even more. Around them, smartphones slowly rose into the air. People whispered to one another, trying to guess what crime could possibly justify such a public arrest. Some assumed fraud. Others guessed car theft. A few simply stared in uncomfortable silence, sensing they had arrived in the middle of something that didn't quite make sense. The woman glanced briefly toward the American flag fluttering above the courthouse across the street before returning her attention to the officers. "I'd appreciate the opportunity to verify my identity," she said politely. Tyler barely looked at her. "You can explain everything downtown." His partner, Officer Kevin Ross, shifted uneasily beside him. Something about the woman's posture seemed strangely familiar. She stood with the disciplined stillness of someone accustomed to responsibility, someone who had spent years carrying burdens heavier than public embarrassment. Yet Tyler dismissed the feeling immediately. Confidence could be an act. Credentials could be forged. Appearances meant nothing. Procedure came first. "Search the vehicle," Tyler instructed. Kevin nodded, though uncertainty lingered across his face. The SUV appeared immaculate. No hidden movements. No suspicious clutter. Everything inside seemed carefully organized, almost military in its precision. Still, Tyler remained convinced he was moments away from uncovering evidence that would justify every decision he had made. The woman watched quietly as officers examined the vehicle without offering resistance or complaint. She never raised her voice. She never pleaded for sympathy. Instead, after several long seconds, she spoke just one sentence that almost disappeared beneath the growing noise of curious onlookers. "May I make one phone call before we leave?" Tyler let out a short laugh, shaking his head with quiet confidence before reaching for the rear passenger door of the patrol vehicle. One phone call isn't going to change anything. Neither he nor anyone standing on that sidewalk realized those 7 words would become the biggest mistake of his entire career 40 minutes earlier. The morning had looked completely ordinary. A pale autumn sun stretched across the Potomac River, casting long golden reflections over the quiet streets as Arlington slowly came to life. Government employees filled the sidewalks with practiced routines. Coffee shops welcomed their first customers, and traffic flowed steadily toward federal buildings where another day of decisions would quietly shape the nation. Naomi Carter drove through the city with the same discipline that had guided nearly every day of her adult life. Her dark blue sport utility vehicle moved at exactly the posted speed limit, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, her attention fixed on the road ahead. There was nothing flashy about her appearance. She preferred practical clothing over decorated uniforms whenever official ceremonies did not require them. Years earlier, She had learned that real leadership rarely announced itself before entering the room. At 54 years old, Naomi carried herself with quiet confidence that could not be purchased or imitated. Every decision she made reflected decades of service, sacrifice, and responsibility. Those who worked alongside her admired not only her strategic mind, but also her remarkable ability to remain calm when everyone else allowed emotions to take control. Young officers often described her as the kind of leader whose voice became quieter when circumstances became more difficult. That steady presence had earned trust from thousands of service members under her command. Yet none of those accomplishments could be seen by strangers passing her on the street that morning. They saw only a black woman driving alone through a government district. They could not see the years she had spent serving overseas, the difficult missions that demanded impossible choices, or the countless families who had written letters thanking her for bringing their loved ones home safely. On the passenger seat rested a simple leather portfolio containing briefing documents for a classified meeting scheduled at a nearby military installation. The meeting involved senior defense officials and required strict confidentiality. Naomi had reviewed every page before leaving home, then carefully locked the folder exactly as protocol required. Her schedule left little room for delays, but she never rushed. Punctuality, she often reminded younger officers, began with preparation rather than speed. As she approached an intersection only a few blocks from her destination, she noticed flashing patrol lights several hundred feet behind her. Without hesitation, she activated her turn signal, safely pulled to the curb, lowered her window, and placed both hands visibly on the steering wheel before the officers even reached her vehicle. Years of experience had taught her that professionalism often began before the first conversation. She greeted the approaching officer with a polite nod and a calm expression. Officer Tyler McCall stopped beside the driver's window, studying her face before speaking. There was something about her composed posture that he immediately interpreted as unusual. Instead of seeing discipline, he saw confidence that he believed needed to be challenged. Naomi answered each question clearly and respectfully, never interrupting, never raising her voice, expecting what she believed would be a brief misunderstanding resolved through routine verification. She had no reason to imagine that within minutes ordinary questions would transform into public suspicion, curious spectators, and a moment that would quietly expose how quickly assumptions could replace facts when patience disappeared. Officer Tyler McCall listened with only half his attention as Naomi Carter answered every question with quiet precision. Her driver's license matched the registration. The insurance card was current. There were no outstanding warrants connected to her name, no alerts attached to the vehicle, and nothing immediately visible that suggested criminal activity. Yet instead of easing the tension, the absence of obvious problems only deepened Tyler's suspicion. Something about the situation refused to fit the conclusion he had already reached in his own mind. Experience had taught Naomi that once someone decided who you were before hearing your story, facts often became secondary. She had encountered moments like this before, not only during her years in uniform, but throughout a lifetime of walking into rooms where people underestimated her before she spoke a single word. Those experiences had shaped her into the leader she had become. They had taught her that dignity was strongest when it remained steady under pressure. She looked directly at Tyler and spoke with the same calm tone she had used while briefing military commanders and congressional committees. "Officer, if there is any concern, I am happy to cooperate. I only ask that my credentials be verified through the appropriate channels." Tyler folded his arms. "We will decide what channels are appropriate." Naomi simply nodded. "Very well." The answer somehow frustrated him even more. He expected resistance. He expected excuses. He expected someone trying desperately to talk their way out of trouble. Instead, he found himself standing across from a woman whose confidence seemed completely untouched by the growing uncertainty around her. Officer Kevin Ross quietly walked around the vehicle once more before stopping near Tyler. "Everything checks out so far," he said softly enough that only Tyler could hear. "Maybe we should run another verification before we go any further." Tyler glanced toward Naomi, who remained standing exactly where he had instructed, her posture straight, her hands relaxed, her expression unreadable. To him, that composure looked rehearsed. "People can fake documents," he replied. "People cannot fake discipline," Kevin almost answered, but stopped himself. Something about Naomi reminded him of his grandfather, a retired Marine who had once told him that true leaders never needed to announce themselves because everyone else eventually noticed. Kevin could not explain why that memory suddenly surfaced, but it stayed with him. Across the street, more pedestrians slowed to watch. A delivery driver paused beside his truck. Two office workers whispered while pretending not to stare. Someone began recording with a phone, sensing that the encounter was becoming more serious than a routine traffic stop. Naomi noticed the cameras, but paid them little attention. Public opinion had never guided her decisions. Character did. She took a slow breath and glanced briefly at her watch. The classified briefing would begin in less than 30 minutes. Somewhere across the city, senior officials would already be arriving at the secure conference room, expecting her presentation. Every passing minute increased the likelihood that someone would notice her absence. Tyler stepped closer once again. "Open the portfolio." Naomi met his eyes without hesitation. "It contains restricted government material. I cannot open it in a public setting without proper authorization." Tyler interpreted the response as refusal. Naomi intended it only as compliance with federal protocol. In that single misunderstanding, two completely different worlds collided. One believed authority came from immediate control. The other understood that real authority came from honoring responsibilities even when no one else understood them. Neither officer realized that the next decision they made would quietly set events in motion that no one present would be able to stop. The atmosphere shifted almost without anyone noticing. What had begun as a routine stop now carried the weight of something far more uncomfortable. The growing circle of onlookers no longer whispered with casual curiosity. Their conversation slowed as they watched the unusual exchange unfold between the officers and the remarkably composed woman standing beside the dark blue sport utility vehicle. Officer Tyler McCall made his decision. "Step away from the vehicle," he said firmly. Naomi Carter complied immediately, taking 2 measured steps backward exactly as instructed. She kept her posture relaxed and her expression composed, refusing to let frustration guide her actions. Every movement reflected years of discipline training, not because she expected special treatment, but because discipline had become part of who she was. Tyler interpreted her silence as calculated confidence. Naomi understood it as respect for the situation. Those two interpretations could not have been farther apart. Officer Kevin Ross watched carefully as Tyler requested additional units over the radio. The call sounded ordinary enough, yet Kevin felt increasingly uneasy. Nothing about Naomi matched the image of someone attempting to hide wrongdoing. She answered every question directly. She followed every instruction without hesitation. Even the tension surrounding her seemed to come entirely from assumptions rather than evidence. "Sir," Kevin said quietly, "perhaps we should contact the Federal Verification Office before escalating this." Tyler shook his head without looking away from Naomi. "We are past that point." Naomi heard every word but remained silent. She knew that arguing rarely changed a mind that had already reached its conclusion. Instead, she focused on remaining calm, trusting that facts eventually had a way of finding daylight. A light breeze carried fallen autumn leaves across the sidewalk, while traffic continued moving through the nearby intersection as though nothing unusual were happening. Office workers paused behind the growing line of spectators. Several people continued recording with their phones, capturing every passing minute without fully understanding what they were witnessing. One elderly veteran, standing near a bus stop, studied Naomi with narrowed eyes. Something about the way she stood caught his attention. Her shoulders remained perfectly square. Her breathing never changed. Even under public scrutiny, she projected the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to carrying immense responsibility. He whispered to himself, "That is military bearing." Nobody nearby seemed to hear him. Tyler instructed another arriving officer to secure the leather portfolio as evidence until its contents could be examined through official procedures. Naomi immediately spoke, her voice calm and respectful. "Officer, those documents are protected under federal regulations. They should remain sealed until proper authorization is obtained." Tyler answered without hesitation. "That determination will not be made by you today." Naomi slowly lowered her eyes for a brief moment before looking back at him. There was disappointment in her expression, but not resentment. She had spent an entire career defending institutions because she believed they worked best when people honored both authority and responsibility together. Watching procedure drift away from principle saddened her far more than the inconvenience she personally faced. Her watch indicated less than 20 minutes remained before the classified briefing was scheduled to begin. Somewhere inside a secure conference room, empty seats were waiting. Senior officials would soon begin asking why General Naomi Carter had failed to arrive exactly on time for a meeting she had never once missed during her distinguished career. Yet standing on that sidewalk, surrounded by flashing patrol lights and curious strangers, nobody present knew that one unanswered question inside a military command center was about to trigger a search that would reach directly to the place where Naomi quietly waited, still hoping someone would choose verification before judgment. For several long seconds, nothing happened. The city continued moving around them as if the moment were ordinary. Cars rolled through green lights. A distant train echoed across the river. Somewhere nearby, church bells marked the passing of another quarter hour. Yet for Naomi Carter, time had begun to feel strangely suspended. She stood exactly where the officers had instructed, her breathing slow and steady, refusing to allow frustration to replace discipline. She had spent decades teaching young service members that composure was not the absence of pressure, but the ability to think clearly despite it. Now she quietly lived the lesson she had repeated countless times. Officer Kevin Ross could no longer ignore the growing feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. He stepped away from the crowd and quietly reviewed the information that dispatch had already returned. Every database produced the same answer: valid driver's license, valid registration, clean record. Nothing suggested criminal conduct. The more information he received, the less comfortable he became. He walked back toward Tyler McCall and lowered his voice. "We still have nothing concrete. We should verify her federal credentials before moving forward." Tyler barely glanced at him. "You are letting appearances fool you. Confidence does not equal innocence." Kevin looked across the sidewalk toward Naomi. "No," he replied carefully, "but neither does suspicion equal guilt." Tyler said nothing. He simply folded his arms and watched Naomi with unwavering certainty. Around them, the crowd continued to grow. Some people quietly questioned what they were seeing. Others assumed the officers must know something the public did not. A middle-aged woman, standing near a coffee shop, shook her head softly. "She has not argued once," she whispered to her husband. "She has only asked them to verify who she is." Her husband answered with quiet uncertainty. Sometimes the truth takes longer than assumptions. Naomi briefly looked toward the federal office buildings rising above the tree line. Behind reinforced walls and secured entrances, an important meeting would already be missing one essential participant. She imagined the conference room where senior defense officials had gathered around polished tables waiting for briefing materials that had not arrived. She knew her executive assistant would first attempt a phone call, then contact military operations if she failed to answer. Standard procedures existed for moments exactly like this. She trusted those procedures because she had helped improve many of them herself. Tyler noticed her glance toward the skyline. "Looking for someone?" he asked. Naomi answered honestly. "People who expect me are beginning to wonder where I am." Tyler interpreted the statement as another attempt to create pressure. "They can wait." Naomi gently shook her head. "Some responsibilities cannot." The words lingered in the autumn air longer than either officer expected. Kevin studied her expression again. There was no panic, no desesperación, only quiet concern for obligations that clearly mattered deeply to her. Suddenly, a phone vibrated inside Tyler's patrol vehicle. He glanced toward the screen, but ignored the incoming notification, assuming it could wait until the paperwork was complete. Unknown to everyone standing there, that missed alert had been forwarded through several government offices before reaching local dispatch. Elsewhere across Northern Virginia, secure communication lines had become unusually active. A scheduled military briefing had not begun because one of the nation's highest-ranking commanders had disappeared without explanation. Search protocols that almost never activated during peacetime were quietly beginning to move. Standing on that crowded sidewalk, Naomi remained perfectly still. She did not ask for sympathy. She did not demand special treatment. After a thoughtful pause, she looked directly at Tyler and spoke with the same calm voice that had guided thousands through moments far more difficult than this. "Officer, I would like to renew my request. Please allow me to make one phone call. I believe it will answer every question that remains." Officer Tyler McCall studied Naomi Carter for several silent seconds before letting out a slow breath. He had denied her request twice already. Yet something about the growing attention from the crowd and the persistent concern in Kevin Ross's voice convinced him that allowing a brief phone call would not change the outcome he expected. "One call," he said finally. "You stay exactly where you are, and I hear every word." Naomi nodded politely. "Thank you, officer." Kevin retrieved her mobile phone from the front seat of the sport utility vehicle after confirming it remained locked. Naomi calmly explained how to unlock it without making a single unnecessary movement. She accepted the phone carefully, looked at the screen for less than a second, and selected a contact that contained no personal name, only an official office designation. The call connected almost immediately. Naomi's posture became even straighter, her voice steady and professional. "This is General Naomi Carter. Authentication code Sierra 47. I have encountered an unexpected delay while en route to the Arlington briefing. Initiate Protocol 7 and verify my location." She paused for only a heartbeat before adding, "Yes. Local law enforcement. No, they have not verified my credentials. Thank you." She ended the call after fewer than 20 seconds and handed the phone back without another word. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "That was supposed to impress me?" Naomi simply answered, "No, officer. It was intended to inform the people responsible for my absence." The sidewalk fell quiet again. Nothing happened. At least, nothing that anyone present could immediately see. Tyler allowed himself a faint smile, believing the conversation had confirmed nothing except remarkable confidence. "Is that all?" he asked. "That is all," Naomi replied. Kevin glanced toward the patrol vehicles, then toward the busy avenue beyond the intersection. He could not explain why, but the silence no longer felt ordinary. It felt like the brief pause before a storm that had not yet reached the horizon. Less than 2 miles away, inside a secured military operations center, an encrypted notification appeared, simultaneously across multiple command terminals. A scheduled attendee designated as Mission Essential had reported an emergency authentication through a protected communication channel. Within seconds, duty officers confirmed the identity attached to the code. The room changed instantly. Conversation stopped. A senior operations director stood from his chair and issued calm but immediate instructions. Location confirmation. Transportation status. Local coordination. No panic entered the room because panic solved nothing, but urgency spread with unmistakable speed. Telephones connected offices that rarely communicated directly. Secure messages reached defense officials already waiting inside the classified briefing room. A transportation commander redirected nearby personnel. Every action followed established procedure, yet the pace reflected the importance of the individual involved. Back on the sidewalk, Tyler continued preparing paperwork while speaking casually with another responding officer. Several spectators slowly began leaving, assuming the incident had reached its conclusion. Others remained, sensing that something still felt incomplete. Naomi looked toward the American flag above the courthouse once more. She did not smile. She did not appear relieved. She simply waited with the same patience she had shown from the beginning. Kevin quietly checked the time. Nearly 15 minutes had passed since the missed briefing should have started. He looked back at Naomi. "Do you know what happens now?" he asked softly. She met his eyes with quiet certainty. "Now," she answered, "the people responsible for national security know exactly where I am." Before Kevin could respond, a distant sound drifted across the morning skyline. It was faint at first, almost blending with the normal rhythm of the city, but every veteran standing nearby recognized it immediately. The steady approach of military helicopters was growing louder with every passing second. The sound grew stronger with every passing second until conversations across the sidewalk faded into complete silence. People instinctively looked toward the clear Virginia sky, shielding their eyes from the morning sun as two military helicopters appeared in the distance, maintaining a precise formation while moving toward the government district. Their steady approach transformed curiosity into confusion. Officer Tyler McCall looked upward only briefly before returning his attention to the paperwork in his hands. "Probably another routine transport," he muttered, refusing to believe the aircraft had anything to do with a woman standing quietly beside him. Officer Kevin Ross was not so certain. He watched the helicopters continue toward their position instead of passing overhead. At the same time, several dark government vehicles turned onto the boulevard with remarkable coordination. They traveled without unnecessary speed, yet every driver on the road seemed to instinctively move aside. The crowd noticed the convoy almost immediately. Conversation stopped. Phones that had been recording Naomi now turned toward the approaching vehicles. Within moments, the lead vehicle came to a controlled stop near the patrol cars. The doors opened almost simultaneously. Uniformed military police officers stepped out first, followed by several senior officers wearing formal service uniforms decorated with rows of ribbons earned through decades of distinguished service. Their expressions remained composed, but their purpose was unmistakable. A tall Army colonel walked directly toward the scene without hesitation. Tyler stepped forward, instinctively placing himself between the arriving officers and Naomi. "This is an active police investigation," he announced. "I need to know who is in charge here." The colonel stopped only a few feet away and presented official identification with calm professionalism. "Colonel Benjamin Hayes, United States Army. We are here regarding General Naomi Carter." Tyler frowned. "General?" Before anyone answered, another vehicle arrived carrying a two-star general accompanied by civilian officials from the Department of Defense. The senior general approached Naomi first. Without the slightest delay, he came to attention and rendered a crisp military salute. Every military police officer standing nearby immediately followed. The movement was so precise that even people with no military experience recognized its significance. The entire sidewalk became silent. Naomi returned the salute with quiet dignity before lowering her hand. "Thank you for coming, General Whitmore," she said. "I apologize for delaying the briefing." General Whitmore shook his head respectfully. "Ma'am, your safety and accountability take priority. The briefing has been postponed pending your arrival." Tyler felt the color drain from his face. His eyes shifted from the stars displayed on General Whitmore's uniform back to Naomi, whose calm expression had never changed from the moment the encounter began. Kevin slowly lowered his gaze, finally understanding why every instinct had warned him that something about the situation was profoundly different. Colonel Hayes turned politely toward Tyler. His voice remained measured, completely free of hostility. "Officer, General Naomi Carter currently serves in one of the highest operational leadership positions within the United States Army. Her travel today involved classified responsibilities. We appreciate your concern for public safety, but this matter should have been resolved through credential verification before reaching this point." Tyler struggled to respond. Every assumption he had made only minutes earlier now collapsed beneath simple facts. Around them, the spectators who had expected another ordinary police stop witnessed something entirely different. They saw respect offered not because of rank alone, but because years of honorable service had earned it. Naomi looked at Tyler without anger or satisfaction. Her voice remained calm, exactly as it had been from the beginning. "Officer McCall," she said gently, "sometimes the most important identification is the one we never take the time to verify." No one spoke for several long moments. Even the city itself seemed quieter, as though the weight of what had just happened had settled over the sidewalk. Officer Tyler McCall slowly lowered the folder he had been holding, his confidence replaced by a silence that felt heavier than any explanation he could offer. The assumptions that had guided every decision he made that morning had dissolved in front of dozens of witnesses without a single raised voice or dramatic confrontation. General Naomi Carter remained exactly as she had been from the beginning, composed, respectful, and focused on the responsibility waiting beyond the unexpected delay. General Whitmore glanced briefly toward Colonel Benjamin Hayes before turning back to Naomi. "Ma'am, transportation is ready whenever you are." Naomi nodded, then looked toward Tyler and Kevin one final time before taking a step toward the military convoy. Instead of leaving immediately, she stopped. "Before I go," she said quietly, "there is one request I would like to make." Every person nearby listened. Tyler expected criticism. Some spectators anticipated anger. Others assumed she would demand immediate punishment for everyone involved. Instead, Naomi spoke with remarkable calm. "Please allow every review to follow the proper process. Let the evidence speak before opinions do. Colonel et nodded respectfully." "That will be done, General." Naomi continued. "The body camera recordings, dispatch logs, communication records, and verification timeline should all be examined together. If mistakes were made, they should become lessons that strengthen public trust rather than weaken it." Her words surprised everyone standing nearby. There was no desire for humiliation, no demand for revenge, only a clear expectation that accountability should serve justice rather than emotion. Kevin Ross lowered his head for a moment before looking directly at Naomi. "General Carter," he said sincerely, "I am sorry that we did not verify your identity sooner." Naomi offered him a small, understanding smile. "Thank you, Officer Ross. Verification protects everyone, citizens and officers alike." Tyler remained silent until finally forcing himself to speak. "General, I believed I was following my instincts." Naomi met his eyes without bitterness. "Instinct can begin an investigation, Officer McCall. It should never replace one." The sentence landed with quiet force. Nobody argued because nobody needed to. The truth spoke clearly enough on its own. Nearby, reporters who had begun arriving after hearing unusual radio traffic carefully documented the official statements. Several witnesses voluntarily approached investigators to provide their observations. Military officials coordinated respectfully with local supervisors, emphasizing cooperation rather than conflict. The atmosphere changed from tension to professionalism as every agency focused on understanding exactly how an ordinary traffic stop had evolved into a national security concern. Later that afternoon, the Arlington Police Department announced an administrative review consistent with department policy whenever questions arose regarding procedure and verification. Additional training on credential confirmation and interagency communication would also be evaluated. No accusations were made before the facts were collected. No conclusions were rushed. The process Naomi had asked for had already begun. As she entered the waiting government vehicle, General Whitmore looked toward her with quiet admiration. Most people would have responded very differently. Naomi looked through the window at the officers still standing on the sidewalk. "Leadership is not tested when people agree with you," she answered softly. "It is tested when disappointment gives you every excuse to forget your principles." The convoy slowly pulled away, leaving behind flashing patrol lights, silent spectators, and one unforgettable lesson that every person present would carry long after the street returned to its ordinary rhythm. The following Monday morning, the sidewalks outside the Arlington Police Department looked exactly as they always had. Patrol cars came and went. Officers greeted one another before beginning another shift. Citizens walked past the building without realizing that one ordinary traffic stop from the previous week had already become a case study discussed inside briefing rooms across multiple agencies. The administrative review moved forward quietly, guided by facts instead of speculation. Body camera recordings confirmed that General Naomi Carter had remained respectful from the first conversation until the last. Dispatch records showed that every available database had returned valid information. Communication logs revealed that opportunities for additional credential verification had existed before the situation escalated. The findings did not describe a failure of courage. They described the danger of allowing assumptions to outrun procedure. Officer Kevin Ross attended every review session with complete honesty. He openly acknowledged the concerns he had raised during the encounter and admitted that he wished he had pressed harder for immediate federal verification. His supervisors noted both his professionalism and his willingness to learn from the experience. Officer Tyler McCall also appeared before the review panel. The confidence that had once defined his decisions had been replaced by thoughtful reflection. When asked what lesson he had taken from the incident, he answered without hesitation. I stopped seeing the person because I believed I already understood the situation. That was my mistake. No one applauded. No one criticized him publicly. Accountability did not require humiliation. It required honesty. Several weeks later, representatives from local law enforcement, federal agencies, and military leadership gathered for a joint training seminar focused on interagency cooperation and professional communication. The keynote speaker surprised many attendees. General Naomi Carter accepted the invitation without hesitation. She stood before a room filled with uniforms from different departments and spoke without notes. Every profession represented here exists for the same reason, she began. To protect people, preserve trust, and serve something greater than ourselves. The room remained completely silent. Verification is not a sign of weakness, she continued. It is one of the greatest expressions of professionalism. When we slow down long enough to confirm the truth, we protect innocent people, we strengthen institutions, and we protect the integrity of those who wear every uniform with honor. Officer Tyler McCall sat quietly near the back of the room, listening to every word. When the seminar concluded, he approached Naomi privately. "General Carter," he said sincerely, "I cannot change what happened that morning, but I can make sure it never happens the same way again." Naomi extended her hand, and Tyler accepted the handshake with genuine respect. "That is how trust is rebuilt," she replied. "One decision at a time." Months later, updated verification procedures and additional interagency training became standard practice within the department. Few citizens ever learned why those changes had been introduced, but every improvement carried the quiet influence of one encounter that could have ended very differently. Naomi never asked to be remembered as a victim or as a hero. She simply continued serving her country with the same humility that had defined her entire career. Long after the headlines faded and the recordings stopped circulating, one truth continued to echo far beyond that Arlington sidewalk. A uniform can command authority, but character earns respect. Rank may reveal responsibility, but dignity reveals leadership. And the strongest form of justice is not found in proving someone wrong. It is found in choosing the truth before judgment has the chance to become certainty. Please like and subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of justice.